Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We have all of our second round matchups in the NBA playoffs, with the exception of one that we have to find out. The Eastern Conference is all set. We will have Miami taking on the New York Knicks, the Boston Celtics taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. In the West, we know the Denver Nuggets will be playing the Phoenix Suns. What we don't know is who is going to be in the other semi-final series in the Western Conference, because the Lakers and the Grizzlies and the Kings and the Warriors have to still decide who is going to advance. And we could be getting answers to that question tonight, Sap, as the Lakers and the Grizzlies are at 3-2. Lakers advantage over Memphis, and Golden State holds a 3-2 advantage over the Sacramento Kings. So, Sap, do you want to start with those two series in the Western Conference before we get into the second round matchups in the East?
Sure, yeah, wrap those up. Hopefully they wrap up tonight so the Golden State Lakers series can get underway as soon as possible, and all four series will be kind of matched up, and you're on your way to the second round of the playoffs. As you said, the Lakers have a 3-2 lead over Memphis. Game 6 is in LA. Golden State, after trailing 2-0, has won 3 straight and has Game 6 with a 3-2 lead at the Chase Center, where the Warriors are that much tougher to beat than they are on the road. But they were able to get Game 5 in Sacramento to take control of the series. So I think the NBA would like to see Lakers, Golden State both win. So you've got LeBron and Curry, great second round matchup. The story of Sacramento, the story of Memphis has been fascinating, but I think both of those teams have bright futures. It's just more about the now for the Lakers and the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, and I think as far as the Sacramento Golden State series, which has been a really, really fun series, all these games have been super competitive and entertaining. It doesn't seem like Sacramento is quite there yet, quite ready to put away a veteran team like the Warriors. This is, again, their first playoff appearance in 16 years. So they have no playoff experience, with the exception of, a couple veterans on their team, like Harrison Barnes. But they just they haven't been there yet. And the Warriors have been there time and time again, obviously. So, yes, they got out to that 2-0 lead, but I think everybody expected Golden State to bounce back at some point. The Kings are also dealing with a De'Aaron Fox injury, and he was still really, really effective and played really well the other night despite that broken finger. But we know he's not at 100%, so that certainly hurts them. And so you expect that with a young team to be inconsistent, and with the veteran team to be able to rally. With the Grizzlies and Lakers series, it's kind of like both those teams have been inconsistent. You've seen flashes of both of those teams playing really, really well and playing to their game and playing to their top level. And then you've seen them sort of revert to the bad version of themselves. And you saw that in Game 5 with the Lakers, and that should have been a game that they put away Memphis, and they just didn't play well at all. LeBron didn't have a good game. Davis didn't have a good game. They didn't play well defensively, which has sort of been their calling card. And they've really let Memphis back into the series where they could have easily just put their foot on the throat of the Grizzlies and tossed them in 5 games.
And as we get later in this series, it's every other day, which gives the Lakers a slight disadvantage because LeBron is 38, has a lot of mileage on that body. Anthony Davis needs time to recover. So when you're playing every other day, maybe LeBron and Anthony Davis don't have as much juice as you would like, and the defensive effort isn't quite there. But I think in Game 6, the Lakers are going to look at this as not necessarily a must-win, because if they lose, there's still an opportunity to win this series in 7, but kind of wrap this thing up in LA. You catch your breath, and then if you're the Lakers, you hope that Golden State Sacramento goes to 7 games, so you get even more breathing room before the next series starts. But the thing about the Lakers and Memphis is it's been within games itself. Like the Lakers were up 35-9 after the first quarter in Game 4, and then the final 3 quarters, Memphis outplayed them, and that kind of carried over into Game 5. So it's not been just game to game. It's been within the game, within stretches within a quarter where one team has looked incredible, and then it kind of flips at that moment and the other team takes over. So you do have two teams that have flaws, that have been inconsistent. but they continue to battle, and it's been a fairly interesting series. The Sacramento series with Golden State, I think, kind of flipped when Golden State and head coach Steve Kerr decided to bring Draymond Green off the bench, which I think is a really wise move because Draymond Green is a perfect sixth man. He gives you defensive effort. He's an outstanding passer. He can rebound. He's not a scorer anymore. He never was really a great scorer, but he can kind of fill in the gaps. And since he's been coming off the bench, Golden State looks like a much better team than they were early in the series.
Yeah, I take back what I said about Anthony Davis in game 5. He was actually really, really good in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I had that wrong. It was LeBron that struggled, and D'Angelo Russell that struggled, and Austin Reeves was not very efficient, but he still had 17 points, and their bench gave them very little, with the exception of Hachimura, who had 9 points. But yeah, again, I think the Grizzlies-Lakers series has been about, okay, what team is going to be consistent and impose their will, and that's basically ping pong throughout the series. And, the Lakers, a lot of pressure on them tonight because this is, if they don't win this in LA, game 7 is in Memphis because Memphis is the higher seed. So the Lakers certainly want to get it done in LA. Not that they're incapable of winning in Memphis, but you'd much rather get it done on your home court than have to face that game 7 on the road, Sap.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want to go back to Memphis, and also you want to set yourself up to get a little rest before the next series, especially if Golden State Sacramento goes to a 7th game. We know what LeBron James has done throughout his career in game 7s. He's averaged 35 points, 11 rebounds, 9 assists in those 7th games. There have been several of them. He just steps it up in game 7. Hopefully he has that mentality in game 6, so he doesn't have to get to a game 7. But he looked spent the other night, and I'm surprised the Lakers played him 37 minutes because Memphis kind of took control of that game in the second half. Why bother having LeBron out there? You make a little bit of a run so the final score is closer than it probably should have been. But, why spend 37 minutes on the floor when maybe you could play 27 minutes, have a little more in the tank for game 6? But LeBron generally steps up in these games, especially when he comes off an off game. He generally has a big game following that, and that's what the Lakers are going to need tonight to try to wrap this series up.
Yeah, and in game 5, their 3-point shooting was god-awful, Sap, and that was led by LeBron James, 1 of 9 from 3. They shot 25% from 3 for the night. That's just not going to get it done on most nights. So you got to assume that they'll shoot the 3 ball a little bit better. Not that LeBron has shot the 3 well at all this season, but he has been better than 1 for 9, which is, awful. So yeah, a really interesting set of games tonight for the Western Conference to see who becomes the final 2 teams to come out of that conference. But we can look ahead and preview a potential Lakers Warriors series, which we kind of think it's going to be, or it could be Memphis Sacramento, Memphis Golden State. Who the hell knows, Sap? But we'll preview that when we do have a determination on who it's going to be. But since we do have the other 3 series all figured out, let's take a look at them and give you a little bit of a preview on what those are going to be. So we'll remain in the Western Conference since we're already there, Sap, and we'll look at the 1-seeded Nuggets taking on the 4-seeded Phoenix Suns. Both teams didn't have much of a problem in the first round, winning their respective series 4-1. Each of them did that. Phoenix beating the Clippers, who were undermanned. Denver beating the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were sort of a mess. You could certainly make a very strong case, Seth, that these are the 2 best teams in the Western Conference, and that the winner of this series should very well may represent the Western Conference in the finals. I kind of think that's what's going to be the case. To me, this is going to be about the cohesiveness of Denver in that they've played together for a while and their depth against the star power of the Phoenix Suns.
Without question. I mean, I don't think Phoenix looked that impressive in beating the Clippers in 5 games. You didn't have Paul George for any game, and then after game 2, you didn't have Kawhi Leonard for games 3, 4, and 5. And the Clippers still kind of battled Phoenix and then just kind of ran out of gas down the stretch. And Kevin Durant, Devin Booker were able to do what they do. Chris Paul had some good games in the series, some poor games in the series, as did DeAndre Ayton. I think the key matchup in this Denver-Phoenix series is Ayton against Jokic. Not necessarily they're going to go mano-a-mano on every possession, but, can Ayton at least do a good job on the board so Jokic isn't controlling the backboard and kind of negate all of those strengths that Jokic gives you? And then you go from there to see, is Aaron Gordon going to be matched up on Kevin Durant? Not that he's going to outplay him, but he could play good defense. Michael Porter Jr. is always a wild card. He could have 30 one night and 6 the next night. He's that up and down. The key also with Denver is Jamal Murray seems to be playing better and better every game. Seems to be more like Jamal Murray in the bubble. Not quite there yet, but remember when he went head to head against Donovan Mitchell in that famous
Sure.
Utah Denver series? He outplayed Donovan Mitchell, and I don't know if he's quite at that level right now, but he's getting closer to that, and that gives Denver yet another score. But I still like Phoenix in this situation because Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, they're sensational together, and they're so darn efficient. It almost feels like they could score 60, 65 a night in their sleep and do it efficiently. And again, I think I'd give them a slight edge. Although Denver has home court advantage, I'd probably lean towards Phoenix right now.
Yeah, I think that Phoenix, their record with Kevin Durant is just outstanding. And I think that's obviously intimidating. And when you're looking across the court and you're seeing all these all-star players and frankly the Hall of Fame players and Chris Paul and Kevin Durant, you're that's a daunting matchup. So the way you take advantage of it, and the only way that I see that teams beat Phoenix is you got to really test their depth, which
Mhm.
isn't very impressive. So you got to get to your bench. Denver's got a pretty good bench. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's pretty good. It's better than Phoenix's. And then you also have to test the fact that these guys on Phoenix, even though their record's great with Kevin Durant, they're still not super familiar with playing with him. And this group in Denver has been together for a long time now. So maybe that gives them a bit of an advantage, Sap. Not that, Phoenix, most of their core, with the exception of Durant, has been together for a little while, and they have reached the NBA Finals. But it's, now when you're adding a piece like Kevin Durant, it changes some of the things you do, not necessarily in a bad way, but it still changes things. So for Denver to win, they have to play, their style of basketball, sort of try to impose what they do. And they also have to be able to, when those star players on Phoenix are getting a rest, you need to win those bench minutes. If you're losing the bench minutes against Phoenix, you have absolutely no chance to beat them.
Yeah, because those starters are going to not necessarily dominate, but they're going to outplay your starters for the most part, right? When Durant, Booker, Paul, and Ayton are on the floor together, Phoenix is, I think, the best unit in basketball. Their lack of depth does cause problems, though. You compare it to, say, the Celtics, who their starting five is outstanding, but when they go to the bench, Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams the third, maybe Grant Williams in the next series. He didn't do all that much against Atlanta, but the Celtics' depth is better than Phoenix's. But I think you make a case that those top four guys for Phoenix are the best four-man unit in all of basketball. They could pretty much put either you or I out there, Jet, and they would still be a great starting five. That's how good those guys are. Again, provided Chris Paul's more consistent and is able to stay healthy. We've seen him over the last couple of years. As the playoffs continue, he tends to fade. He's going to be turning 38 shortly. He's a point guard. Point guards don't generally last that long. Now, he's been able to last that long because he's more skilled than athletic. A lot of the athletic point guards don't last well past their early 30s, whether it's John Wall or Russell Westbrook or Derrick Rose. Those guys rely on athleticism, where Paul relies more on skill. But I still like Phoenix in this series because, again, Durant, look, the guy can go out and get 35 on 15 or 16 shots, which just blows my mind away. And Booker is somewhat similar to that. So now you're getting 65 points from two guys who aren't necessarily ball dominant. They're going to go out there and do their thing, and Chris Paul's going to set them up. I would take Phoenix in this series.
Yeah, I agree. I had Phoenix going to all the way to the championship round, so I'm not gonna back off of that. I think that whether or not you were impressed with them winning 4-1, again, their record with Kevin Durant is outstanding. So I'm gonna stick with them going all the way to the NBA Finals. Though, for Denver, I'm not gonna say that they have no chance at beating Phoenix. I think that again, like I said, they have some advantages somewhere, but we talk about elevating in the playoffs. We're going to talk about Jimmy Butler in a second. Jokic has to elevate in the playoffs. That seems almost impossible. Like, how can you elevate from averaging essentially a triple-double in the regular season? But more so guys like Murray that you mentioned and Porter Jr., those guys need to take things to another level for them to be able to beat Phoenix. I think they're capable of doing it, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do it, Sap.
Right. And Jokic, he's kind of flatlined in the playoffs the last few years, despite winning back-to-back MVPs. Again, he plays kind of a subtle game. He's not going to necessarily go out and score 40 points. He'll get you 25, 26 points. He'll be dominant on the boards and I'm obviously setting up his teammates. He's such a great passer. The Denver Nuggets are such a weird organization. They came into the league the year of the merger, 1976, 77. They have never made it to the NBA Finals. I'll make a
Right.
case that they're the best NBA franchise to have never played in the NBA Finals, which is kind of an odd thing to give them. And they've had a lot of great players. You know, it was David Thompson, Alex English, Kiki Vandeweghe, Carmelo Anthony. Now you've got the two-time reigning MVP,
Dikembe,
Nikola
yeah.
Jokic, Dikembe, Mutombo. I know Iverson played there briefly, but you know he was washed at that point. But you know they've had a lot of really good players, and they've just never able to break through. And again, the West has been dominated over the last 20 years by Kobe and Shaq with the Lakers, Duncan with the Spurs, Golden State obviously with Steph, and even the few years that Kevin Durant was there. So they've never been able to really break through. This is their best chance. They're the 1 seed. They have home court advantage. They have a great player in Jokic and some really good pieces. But I will take Kevin Durant in a series like this because I think he's healthy now, focused, and he's got the pieces around him that he can just go do his thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I'll take Phoenix in this, but I do think that Denver is hearing the noise that, okay, we're the 1 seed and nobody's picking us or picked us before the playoffs started. And that could give them a little bit of an edge to play with, which is always a good thing, but we will have to see. It's certainly Phoenix presents a much bigger challenge than Minnesota did, and the Nuggets present a much bigger challenge than the injured Clippers did. So both the teams are taking a huge step up in terms of who they're playing. Let's look at the Eastern Conference then, Sap. Since I said we were going to talk about him, let's talk about him. Miami advances to the conference semifinals to play the New York Knicks in a 1990s throwback series, which I'm really looking forward to. But the reason that they are there and they took care of the 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks in a historic 4-1, they beat them in 5 games. And basically it was on the back of one Jimmy Butler, who was, I think I tweeted this out, Sap, appears to be a cyborg designed just to win playoff basketball games. What he's done the past 2 games against the Bucks is just remarkable. He's playing better than anybody on the planet right now. That includes LeBron James, that includes Joel Embiid, that includes Kevin Durant. Jimmy Butler has had the best playoffs by a mile. Actually, I'd say Devin Booker's at the second best, but Jimmy Butler has been just a freak and unstoppable in every single way. So Miami is riding their star to this point. In New York, it's been more of sort of a collaborative effort, Sap. You know, you're getting big games out of Jalen Brunson. You're getting big games out of Mitchell Robinson. And it's much more of that sort of team philosophy, whereas Miami said, okay, we're going to get the ball to Jimmy Butler and everybody get out of his freaking way. So this is a really interesting matchup, Sap. Again, all eyes on Jimmy Butler. But these two teams have a history. They don't like each other. And neither team is, I'd say, particularly talented. So it could be a really fun, dirty 1990s basketball series that I love. I know you don't, Sap.
Right. Yeah. This is going to give me, the shakes trying to watch this series. All I could think of is Jeff Van Gundy holding on to Alonzo Mourning's leg, during a fracas, because the Heat and the Knicks, they battled each other, and a lot of it had to do with Pat Riley, right? I mean, he went to the Knicks, he brought that toughness with him. The Knicks, that's how they played in the 90s with Ewing and Anthony Mason and Charles Oakley. I mean, it felt more like a NFL defensive line than a NBA front court.
Yeah, and Sap,
then he
Van
went to
Gundy's going to
Miami.
call the games, so he might get PTSD.
Yeah, perfect. And then once Riley went to the Heat, the same thing with Alonzo Mourning and tough culture and all of that stuff. So Pat Riley can maybe sit back and watch, 2 of the teams that he worked for and kind of built the culture of both. Obviously, the Knicks years ago, and they've changed coaches a million times. And there are no players left from that day. But, the thing about Jimmy Butler, he scored 98 points in the last 2 games, which just blows my mind because he doesn't really take threes. He's not an efficient or even a good 3-point shooter. And he kind of knows that. I mean, he'll put up a couple. He'll hit one every now and then, but he doesn't look to score from there. He's a mid-range guy, takes it to the basket. Nothing really fancy. I mean, it's not as if he's going to the basket and just dunking on everyone. He just knows how to score. And, we were talking
free
last
throws.
week, and free throws. He gets to the line and hits, 85% of them. And he seems to play at his own pace, almost like Luka Doncic. Like he never seems rushed. Like he just gets to where
Great
he
point.
has to go. The thing about Jimmy Butler, and we were talking about last week, like who would you compare him to? Because he's excellent in the regular season. I mean, he's a guy who's averaged 20 points per game in the regular season, been an All-Star 5 times, All NBA, first, second, or third team 5 times. I mean, he's had a Hall of Fame resume just in the regular season, but then when he gets to the postseason, it's a completely different level. And you're talking
Yeah,
about
he's
Robert
Michael
Horry.
Jordan.
Yeah, he turns into essentially Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and pick any other great players. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Somehow it's like those four guys were obviously, to me, the four greatest players in the history of the sport that weren't centers, and Jimmy Butler, who I think eventually will make it to the Hall of Fame. But the thing about Butler, you kind of mentioned a little bit of Robert Horry, but Horry hit big shots, but Horry didn't all of a sudden score 25 a game in a series out of nowhere. I'm going to go to another sport. Jimmy Butler, to me, is kind of Kurt Schilling and Madison Bumgarner, like excellent pitchers, right? Guys that were Cy Young Award candidates, great all-star caliber pitchers who, once they got to the postseason, were completely at a different level. They were otherworldly and carried teams to World Series championships. I would compare Butler more to Kurt Schilling and Madison Bumgarner than any basketball player I can even think of.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's tough, Sap. We were doing this just last week or earlier this week, trying to kind of rack our brains. Has there been a player like this? Because, again, he is an all-star caliber player who is an all-NBA caliber player who somehow takes it to just this like Hall of Fame level in the playoffs. And you don't see that very often. Maybe we've never seen it before in the NBA, Sap. But yeah, I mean, those are good examples from the world of baseball. What immediately popped into my head from football was Eli Manning. Do you think that's a good comparison? But
That
I
is
don't
a
feel
good
like
comparison,
he
yeah.
was ever great in the postseason. He just won in the postseason. Like
And he
Butler
only,
is winning and putting up huge numbers.
yeah, I mean, look at even just Butler since he went to Miami, right? Takes them to the finals in the bubble. Then they lose to Milwaukee the next year. Milwaukee goes on and wins the championship. But then last year, he's got Miami in game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals against a better team. I mean, the Celtics are better than Miami last year. And, if he nails that 3-pointer, we might be talking about Heat Warriors in the 2022 NBA Finals. So it's been more often than Eli Manning. And Eli Manning was really good in those runs. This guy is playing, if he had been a quarterback, more like Tom Brady than
Yeah.
Eli Manning, right? Like you make a case, and I think you made it very, very articulately, that he's been the best player in this postseason without question, and Devin Booker would be second. And that's kind of refreshing because it's normally been, okay, LeBron and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and Joel Embiid now is, a superstar, Giannis, whatever. But yeah, this is pretty incredible. And is it enough for him to carry this team to the conference finals again as an 8 seed? I think he can. I think he'll be the best player on the court. The Knicks have someone who's kind of a poor man's version of him, and Jalen Brunson. Brunson's another guy who elevates in the postseason.
He is,
Obviously,
yeah.
we saw what he did in Dallas last year. Dallas made it to the conference finals a year ago and didn't even qualify for the play-in this year. Jalen Brunson's another guy who steps it up big. He did when he was at Villanova. I mean, this is just a guy who is a really good player. I think a borderline all-star. Once you get to the postseason, or in the case when he was in college, he elevates. And that's a great quality to have.
Absolutely. Here's the thing with, we said Devin Booker's been the second best player in the playoffs. I believe that, and I think he deserves a lot of credit. But, he's playing off of Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Ayton. Like, somebody's going to be open. He's been open. He's been making all his shots. He's been scoring, and they've been winning. Who the hell has Jimmy Butler been playing with? He's been playing with, Adebayo has been good, but inconsistent. Tyler Hero had missed virtually the entire first round. Kyle Lowry is completely washed up. And so he's playing with role players, and everybody knows where the ball is going, Sap, and he's still dominating. It's like with Booker, you're like, okay, like pick your poison with that Phoenix Suns team that we just talked about. With the Heat, the Bucks were like, okay, we know exactly where the ball is going. We know exactly what they're doing. We have all NBA defensive players in Giannis and Drew Holiday, and Brook Lopez, and they still couldn't do anything about it. Like he just said, he was not letting them lose games. He was doing whatever he wanted and beating a really, really good defensive team in the Milwaukee Bucks, Sap.
He brought them back from a 14-point deficit in game 4 in the fourth quarter and a 16-point fourth quarter deficit in game 5. And this happens more in the NBA than it did in the past. I mean, 14 and 16-point deficits in the fourth quarter, you can overcome them because of the 3-point shot. Again, Butler doesn't really practice the 3-point shot, but, his teammates did kick in, but he was just exceptional throughout those games. And then even more so in the fourth quarter of both of those games. And do you think that at some point Milwaukee, which is generally considered the best defensive team in basketball, but they kind of do what they do, right? They dare you to shoot 3-pointers, and they didn't really double him. At some point, don't you have to get the ball out of Jimmy Butler's hands and say, someone else, please beat us? I think the Knicks are maybe more apt to do that because Tom Thibodeau is one of the best defensive minds in all of basketball. And
Yeah.
maybe he's going to say, look, Butler's a great player. He's going to get his at some point, but I'm going to make him really have to work for it. And I'm going to have him lean on someone else to help the Miami Heat beat the Knicks. So I think that might be something to look at. If you just single him, he's just going to beat you off the dribble, get to the rack, score, or go to the free throw line where he's, again, like an 85% free throw shooter. He's really good there. I think the Knicks will try to make those adjustments. I just think that Butler will be the best player on the court, and Julius Randle, who is the best Knicks player, is dealing with that ankle, which I don't think is going to be right for the rest of the season. So even though Miami doesn't have home court advantage, I think Jimmy Butler is just going to be too much to overcome, even in the second round against the Knicks.
It's fascinating series, Sap, because obviously no one expected either of these teams to be here. Everybody took the Cavs. Everybody took the Bucks, ourselves included. I've read that Knicks Cavaliers series extremely wrong. I had Cavs in 5 in that one.
Me too.
Flip it around. The Cavs really, they have a lot of questions to ask themselves because they just absolutely wilted. Donovan Mitchell did not have a good series.
No,
nor did, for the most part, anybody on the Cavaliers. And the Knicks elevated. So I think that the Knicks they like being doubted. That sort of fits their DNA under Tom Thibodeau with guys like Brunson, who yes, now he's making big money, but wasn't like a really heralded prospect coming out of Villanova, despite having a lot of success in college. Josh Hart, I think, gave them a lot when they added him at the deadline. Mitchell Robinson has been an up and down season, but he's really elevated in the playoffs. Quickly, he's been very good for them off the bench all year. We know, so those guys have stepped up, even though Randall's been hurt. Top to bottom, with Hero out, the Knicks, I think, have a better roster than the Heat. But the Heat, like as we said, has by far the best player. So it's like, who are you going to take in this series? The Knicks or the team that has Jimmy Butler? Right now, I think you got to say the team that has Jimmy Butler. He's playing that well. But I do think that the Knicks should give Miami more problems than Milwaukee did, because Milwaukee just seemed like once Giannis went down and they started to go down in the series and think they actually could lose, they just seemed completely shaken and rattled. And the Knicks, they're kind of playing with house money here. So, we're talking about a team that's gone this far in the playoffs once in the past 20 years plus. So I don't think New York is going to fear Jimmy Butler or the Miami Heat like like Milwaukee was, which sounds strange because Milwaukee was the 1 seed. But I do think that gives New York a little bit of advantage that no one believed in them. They weren't expected to get this far anyways. And I think that they're ready to just continue to show that they're better than people like you and myself thought that they were.
The amazing thing of those two series, we both picked Milwaukee and Cleveland. Okay, so they both lost, and that can happen. They were both 5-game series, and Cleveland never felt like they were in the series with the Knicks, right? They lost the first game at home. They won the second game, and then the next 3 games, the Knicks were pretty much in control start to finish, and Cleveland never got going on offense. Milwaukee had leads in games 4 and game 5, but we know what Butler did down the stretch and in overtime of game 5, and they were able to beat Milwaukee. And look, they've beaten Milwaukee before. Back in the year of the bubble, Milwaukee was a high seed, expected to go to the finals, and Miami beat them. So Miami's not intimidated really by anybody. They're not intimidated by the Celtics. They're not intimidated by the Bucks, which are the 2 best teams in the Eastern Conference the last several years. So, they're fearless. I think it starts, obviously, with just the whole culture of the Heat with Riley and Spoelstra and the way they conduct themselves, but also Butler's a guy who just doesn't back down. He doesn't fit into the AAU culture because that's not what he was all about. Like, he wasn't heavily recruited, played junior college, went to Marquette, was the last pick in the first round, sat on the bench in his first year. What did he average? 2 points per game his first year in Chicago, and gradually got better and better and better, and now he's a superstar. And I think there's some connection there with Thibodeau, right? Because Thibodeau was his first coach in Chicago. So maybe Thibodeau knows a way to defend Jimmy Butler. Maybe Butler knows what Thibodeau's going to try to do. Again, we're talking 10, 12 years ago when they first, united in Chicago, and Butler's obviously a much better player than he was then. So it's going to be an interesting series. It's going to be some ugly basketball, but I'm going to put my money on Butler again, kind of like I'm picking Phoenix to beat Denver. When these series are that close, I know it's very much a cliche. I'll just take the team with the best player. In the case of Kevin Durant, Phoenix, and the same thing with Jimmy Butler in Miami.
How many games?
I'm going to say 6. I'm going to say 6, which is kind of a cop out. I mean, I know it is. It seems like every
Well,
series,
it's got to be some number, Sep. It's got to be
does.
5, 4, 5,
And no
6, or
matter
7.
what, yeah, someone's going to be, on the threshold of winning a series in game 6 because someone's going to be up 3-2. I'll go game 6. Game 6,
Okay.
6-game series for the Miami Heat.
Heat in 7.
Okay.
And he becomes a huge villain in Madison Square Garden history by winning Game 7 in New York.
He's going to eat that up, isn't he? Just knowing how he is, he's going to love that. That's going to be.
Oh
great
yeah,
theater.
I'm going to love this series for sure. I'm going to watch every game of it. It should be a blast. Not that I haven't watched virtually every game of all these series, anyways. And then the last series, Sap, is the Boston Celtics punched their ticket to the second round last night. It wasn't easy. Overcoming the Atlanta Hawks should have been a easier sledding for the Celtics. We don't have to talk about that right now. They're going to play the Philadelphia 76ers, who seemingly have been off forever. They swept, the only team to sweep in the first round, beat the Brooklyn Nets 4-0. Philly and Boston, longtime rivals. These teams have played each other a lot over the past few years since Joel Embiid and Jason Tatum joined their respective teams. I think both teams look at this, Sep, as their best chance in a while to win an NBA championship. Obviously, because of the lower seeded teams in Miami and New York, whoever wins this series is heavily expected to represent the East in the NBA Finals. I believe the 76ers have the best player on the court, and Joel Embiid, the presumptive MVP. The Celtics, I think, may have the next 2, and then maybe you could make a case from there on out how you want to divvy the roster. I think any matchup with the Celtics are going to win on depth. I think they have the best depth in the league. Philadelphia's advantage is they have the best players. So if you're going by, Sap, what you've said, pick the team with the best player, then I'm assuming you think Philadelphia is going to win this series.
No, because I'm going to pick the Celtics because I picked the Celtics pretty much all season to get to the finals. I think they're the best team in basketball. And I think if you were drafting these two teams, yes, Joel Embiid would be the first pick, although we don't know what his health situation is with that knee. I would think the Celtics have 6 of the top 9 players in this series. I think Embiid, Harden, who's not the same player he was 3-4 years ago in Houston, certainly, but he's still effective at some point. Tyrese Maxey's really good. Then I think the Celtics have 6 of the best 9 players in the series. They're starting 5, whether it's the double bigs or if it's, actually you can make a case 7 of the next 10 players, whatever. I know Tobias Harris is so up and down, but let me put it this way. I'm rambling on here. The top 11 players in this series, 7 are Boston Celtics, 4 Philadelphia 76ers. And if this series goes any kind of depth, goes any kind of deep run, that's just going to favor the Celtics. The Celtics sometimes can't help themselves. Like they should have never gone 6 games with the Atlanta Hawks. Give Atlanta some credit because Trae Young was phenomenal in games 3, 4, and 5. Half of game 6, he was great. And then he just kind of, fell apart in the second half and they still hung in there. But if the Celtics play defense the way they did down the stretch in game 6. Now they're not going to do that for 48 minutes, but if they do that in enough pockets of games, they're going to be very difficult to beat, but they're just better than Philadelphia. I like the Celtics. I'll say 6 games again, my cop-out pick. I just always pick 6 games. 5 doesn't seem like enough because I do respect Philadelphia. And 7, I don't think Philadelphia can extend it to 7, so I'll go Celtics in 6.
Yeah, the Celtics, the thing is, like I said, they've played each other a lot, but the Celtics have owned the 76ers in this stretch. They have a sterling record against the 76ers. Al Horford, for whatever reason, appears to be one of the most effective players in the league at defending Joel Embiid. I don't know why, but he is. I'm not saying that Joel Embiid is going to be stopped. I think that Joel Embiid's going to have a great series. He's going to put up a lot of points if he's healthy. For the Celtics, you have to look at it and say, this guy's the MVP of the league, probably. And we just have to assume he's going to get his. So you have to limit the other guys. You can't let Maxey go crazy. You can't let James Harden have a throwback game. You can't let PJ Tucker sit alone in the corner and, pick up 9 to 12 points off of wide open threes. And you can't let Tobias Harris do the same thing either. they have the ability to take those guys away, and they need to focus on that. If you put all your focus on trying to stop Joel Embiid, the 76ers are going to beat you. You can't play that way, because they have guys that are capable of making open shots. It's a solid roster. Is it as good as the Celtics roster? I don't think so. But if you play just focused on one guy, it's a recipe to lose. So you mentioned the Celtics can't get out of their own way. I agree. I think the Celtics' biggest rivals in all of this are the Celtics. They get in their own way more than any other team. They play down to their competition a lot of the times. They play lackadaisical, sometimes disinterested. They slow the pace when they should speed up the pace. They have problems. The talent, I think, is undeniable. It's a deep team. They have a lot of really, really good players, and they have two, bona fide star players in Tatum and Brown. So based off that, they should win the series, and we're going to get into a lot more Celtics 76ers as the series progresses, because it's a very high-profile series, again, with a lot of history. But the matchup that scares me the most isn't on the court, Sap. It's on the sidelines, Joe Mazzulla, Doc Rivers. I know you're not a huge Doc Rivers guy, but, he's been around the block a lot. He has won a championship. I think he can coach the pants off Joe Mazzulla. I've seen nothing from Joe Mazzulla from the course of the regular season to the postseason to indicate that he has improved as a coach, or that he has what it takes to be a championship level coach. I think that is really holding back the Celtics right now, is that he is just not a very good head coach. I have a lot of questions about him, and he hasn't answered any of them. So that worries me, Sap.
Yeah, I mean, in game 5, you're falling apart and you don't play Malcolm Brogdon the final 8 minutes of the game. Like, Malcolm Brogdon should
They
be
played
in the
Blake
closing
Griffin.
lineup. Played Blake Griffin, right? You didn't play Grant Williams. Grant Williams played, 2 games against Atlanta, hit every one of his 3-pointers. He can play defense. Atlanta's not a big team. They're beating you with penetration. Why don't you have Grant Williams out there, who's more versatile defensively than certainly Hauser or Griffin, I would think. I mean, I know something about basketball to know that. As far as Doc Rivers, I love Doc personally. I really do. I mean, I loved him as a player. When I was covering the sport in the 80s, when the Atlanta Hawks would come in and they played the Celtics several times in the postseason, he was the go-to guy. I'd shoot around in the morning after games. He was great to deal with. I love Doc personally. I think he's kind of lost his way as a coach. I think he's great when he has a lot of talent because he can really manage egos. He had trouble with the Clippers with Kawhi and Paul George, but I think anyone would have trouble with Kawhi Leonard. He's just a very difficult guy to coach who doesn't play all that often, so that's an issue. But I would still take Doc Rivers over Mazzulla at this point, because Doc has been through the wars. He's been coaching for over 20 years. Mazzulla does things that look like something out of like AAU or high school. Like, what's the issue with Grant Williams? Why isn't he playing more? And I'm not a huge Grant Williams fan.
It's almost May, and he hasn't figured out his rotations.
He hasn't.
That's not okay.
He hasn't. I don't understand this. I mean, he keeps pushing for more threes. I mean, game 5, Jason Tatum's 1 for 10 from 3. Like, you're playing into the opposition defense. I mean, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown should be going to the basket more, and Brown does go to the basket, more than Jason Tatum. He has the best roster in basketball. They were the defending Eastern Conference champions, and they added a healthy Rob Williams, who looks pretty good. Maybe not what he did a couple of years ago, but Rob Williams looks pretty good at this point. I don't think he's 100% healthy. He probably never will be. But you've added Malcolm Brogdon, the 6th man of the year, who to me should be on the floor in all closing situations because he's so in control offensively. He's a perfect third option by Brown and Tatum. I don't get it. I mean, to me, this is a big downgrade at coach from Ime Udoka, but they still may win the championship because they're the most talented team. And I don't really see any team out there that looks like they're ready to win a championship. Golden State and the Lakers have the DNA to do it, but are they going to have the legs, a month and a half from now? I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast, which is presented by Full Press Coverage.